They say the hardest part of a long journey is staying awake. But that is a lie. The hardest part is understanding exactly who is sitting next to you in the enclosed cabin, especially when it is the dead of night outside and the nearest town is hundreds of kilometers of empty highway away. Andre had been counting the white stripes on the asphalt for 12 hours straight. The white Renault Master minibus was heading from Chemichel to Paris. Behind lay a difficult border crossing. Ahead, endless darkness. Andre was an experienced driver. He knew this route by heart. Every turn, every gas station, every roadside light. But tonight, everything went off script. It all started with a passenger no one was expecting, and who, according to the documents and booking lists, did not exist at all. This trip was supposed to be ordinary, but it turned into a story that changed the lives of 7 people forever. The inside of the minibus lived its usual nightly life. It smelled of strong coffee from the vending machine, cheap car air fresheners, and the dampness of wet clothes. Outside the window, a fine, tedious rain rustled. European highways looked completely identical at night. The dim, yellow light of street lamps, rare, dirty trucks in the right lanes, the monotonous, lulling hum of wheels. There were 7 people in the cabin. All of them were ordinary passengers who just wanted to get to France. In the front seat, right next to the driver, Alexei was dozing. A man of about 45, a typical migrant worker. He was returning to a construction site near Paris after a short 2-week vacation back home. His heavy, calloused hands rested quietly on his knees. Alexei was an ideal traveling companion. Most of the way he remained silent, did not complain about the cramped space, and slept almost the entire time, snoring softly. Behind him in the second row sat a young couple, students Marta and Denise. They were traveling for a student exchange program, young, in love, full of hope. They constantly whispered about something of their own, shared a single pair of headphones between them, and laughed quietly and restrainedly so as not to wake anyone. Further back by the window sat Pani Maria, an elderly woman in a warm knitted cardigan. She was going to visit her daughter, who had married a Frenchman a few years ago. Pani Maria kept fidgeting with a handkerchief and looked out the window with fear every time a large international semi-truck overtook the minibus. And finally, there was a guy in the right corner, Ihor, a young tourist with a huge green backpack that took up half of the legroom. Ihor barely let go of his phone, intensely catching the weak signal of the roadside Wi-Fi at every stop. From time to time, Andrei glanced in the rearview mirror. Everything was calm. But at a large gas station near the German city of Dresden, everything changed. It was a huge roadside rest area, illuminated by bright, almost blinding neon light. Andrei announced a 20-minute break. The passengers slowly stepped out into the fresh air, stretching their stiff legs. Some went for hot coffee, some to the restroom, some just stood under the canopy, hiding from the night dampness of the German autumn. The driver filled up the tank, paid at the cash register, thoroughly wiped the windshield, and returned to the vehicle. The passengers were already gathering back. They entered the cabin one by one, shivering from the cold. "Is everyone here?" Andrei asked loudly without turning his head. "Yes, let's go, boss. Everyone's accounted for," Alexei replied gruffly from the front seat. Andrei started the engine. The minibus smoothly pulled away, merging into the dark acceleration lane and then onto the high-speed autobahn. Within a minute, the bright lights of the gas station vanished far behind, and the total, thick darkness began again. About half an hour passed. The vehicle ran smoothly on cruise control. The engine hummed quietly. Suddenly, Marta, the student girl, gasped softly but sharply. "Dennis, look!" she whispered, squeezing her boyfriend's hand. "What is it?" Dennis muttered sleepily. "In the back row. Who is that? Where did he come from?" Andrei automatically looked into the rearview mirror. In the very last row of seats where usually no one sat and where only a few small bags lay, someone was there. A person was sitting there. It was a man in a dark, almost black jacket with a deep hood pulled down over his eyes. His face was completely hidden in shadow. He sat absolutely motionless, arms crossed over his chest. Andrei felt the hair on the back of his neck instantly stand on end. When they left Chemichel, the back row was completely empty. The driver remembered this precisely because he had personally checked every single seat. A stranger could not have just boarded the vehicle while it was moving. "Hey friend, who are you?" Andre asked loudly, trying to make his voice sound as confident as possible. The man in the hood did not move and did not even lift his head. "Hey, mister!" Alexei turned around in his passenger seat. "The driver is talking to you. How did you get in here? At the station in Dresden or what?" The cabin of the minibus woke up instantly. The sleepy atmosphere vanished without a trace. "He got in at Dresden," Ihor, the tourist, said quietly. "I saw it out of the corner of my eye. I thought he was someone's acquaintance. He just walked past my seat and sat in the back. I was even surprised that he was so quiet." "I didn't take anyone extra," Andre snapped, and a cold fear began to rise in his chest. "All my seats are booked. There can't be any stray passengers." The minibus was flying down the night Autobahn at a speed of over 100 kilometers per hour, and stopping right in the middle of the highway was deadly dangerous. "Man, take off the hood." Alexei was speaking much more roughly now. He was getting irritated by the situation. He stood up from his seat, holding onto the upper handrails, and moved down the aisle toward the back. "Show your documents, or your ticket. Who are you, and why are you staying silent?" The stranger slowly, very smoothly raised his head. Under the deep hood was a completely ordinary face, pale, very tired, with deep shadows under the eyes. A man of about 35. But the most terrifying part was his eyes. They were completely empty, and looked not at the people, but somewhere through the cabin wall, into the night distance. "I am going to Paris," he said quietly, almost in a whisper. His voice was completely devoid of any human emotion or warmth, like an old, worn-out mechanical recording. "To what Paris? Did you pay for the ride?" Alexei continued to demand indignantly. "I have to be there. They are waiting for me there," the stranger simply repeated. Andre made a decision. 5 kilometers away, according to the signs, there was a small exit from the highway, a Rastplatz, a pocket for trucks to rest. There he would stop the vehicle and kick this strange stowaway out, because an illegal passenger in Europe meant huge fines. "Alexei, sit back down, don't touch him," Andre commanded. "There's a parking lot coming up. We'll stop there and figure it out calmly." The vehicle smoothly turned off the Autobahn onto a dark lot surrounded by dense trees, where only a few large semi-trucks stood with their lights completely off. The silence at this rest stop was oppressive. One could only hear the heavy raindrops tapping on the iron roof. Andre brought the vehicle to a complete stop, set the handbrake, and turned on the cabin lights. The dim bulbs illuminated the frightened faces of the people. "All right, mister, step out." Andre turned around in his seat. "The games are over. Get out of the vehicle." The man in the hood did not even flinch. Alexei decided to act decisively. He took a step forward, reached out his large hand, and firmly grabbed the stranger by the shoulder to pull him out of the seat by force. But in the next second, Alexei jerked his hand back with a shout, as if he had been burned by red-hot iron. His face turned white as chalk in an instant, and he began to back away. He's ice cold," Alexei stammered in a trembling voice. "Guys, he's cold as ice from a freezer. And I didn't feel anything under the jacket. It's like there's just emptiness there, just the fabric, and that's it." "Alexei, don't talk nonsense," Andre shouted, but he himself felt a sticky, cold sweat run down his spine. Real panic broke out in the cabin. Marta covered her face with her hands and wept softly. Dennis pressed the girl close to him, and Pani Maria began to quickly cross herself and recite a prayer. "Get out yourself. Please, just get out," Ihor whispered, shrinking into the very corner of his seat. The stranger slowly turned his empty gaze toward Ihor, then toward Andre. His pale lips moved, but not a single sound came out. And then he did something that took everyone's breath away. He slowly unzipped his dark jacket. Underneath, there was nothing. No sweater, no shirt, no human body, only an old, dirty military dog tag covered with a layer of dark tarnish on a rusty chain. The jacket simply hung in the air, strangely maintaining the volume of a human body. But a second later, the fabric began to sag rapidly, and the hood fell limply onto the seat. There was no longer anyone in the back row, absolute emptiness, just a dark jacket and a metal dog tag that fell onto the rubber floor mat with a quiet chime. A dead silence hung in the cabin of the minibus. Only the steady hum of the diesel engine idling could be heard. Andrei froze, gripping the steering wheel tightly. He had seen it with his own eyes. The person had not fled. He had simply dissolved into thin air. "What on earth was that?" Denise whispered, barely audibly. Alexei, recovering slightly, slowly bent down and carefully picked up the rusty dog tag with 2 fingers. Under the light of the cabin lamp, the stamped letters and numbers were clearly visible, an old military issue from the French Foreign Legion. "There's a name written here," Alexei said. "Jean-Pierre. And a date, 1994. 30 years ago." "Is this some kind of stupid prank?" Ihor suddenly shouted hysterically. "Where are the cameras? Are you filming this for YouTube?" Andrei did not answer the boy. He stared intently at the jacket left on the seat. An ordinary work jacket, but on its inside pocket was an old, faded emblem of one of the first logistics companies in Przemysl, which had gone bankrupt and closed back in the early 2000s. And then an old story surfaced in Andrei's memory. One he had once heard from older international drivers at the depot. Back in 1994, a driver from Przemysl used to transport the first migrant workers to France. Back then, they drove on old, narrow roads, and on one of those rainy nights, somewhere near Dresden, his minibus got into a horrific accident. Everyone died. Among them was a young Ukrainian guy who had served under contract in the Legion for several years and was finally returning home. But before that, he wanted to stop by Paris, where his beloved girl had been waiting for him for years. His body was never found after that crash. The vehicle had burned completely, down to the metal. "He's just looking for his ride," Pani Maria said quietly. Her eyes were full of deep sorrow. "He has been trying to get to where he couldn't get back then for 30 years. His soul is stuck on this road." "We need to drive on," Andrei gritted his teeth. His hands were still trembling, but his responsibility for the living passengers overpowered his fear. "We can't stand here. We need to get to Paris." He turned off the cabin lights, shifted into gear, and smoothly pressed the gas pedal, returning to the night highway. The next few hours of the journey passed as if in one continuous, heavy fog. No one in the cabin closed their eyes again, and most importantly, no one looked back where the empty jacket lay. It felt as if space itself had changed inside the bus. The digital clock on the front dashboard began to behave strangely, flickering chaotically with numbers. As the minibus began to approach the border with France, the night fog became so thick that visibility dropped to just 10 meters. Andrei cut the speed to a minimum. There wasn't a single other car around, just a gray, impenetrable shroud. And suddenly, the familiar silhouette appeared in the rearview mirror again. He had returned. The stranger was sitting in his place again, but this time he was no longer wearing the jacket. He sat in an old military shirt of a legionnaire. A terrible, deep sadness was visible on his face. "Are we close?" he asked, and this voice echoed directly in the head of everyone in the cabin as a clear, powerful thought. "We are close, friend," Andrei replied aloud, quietly but firmly. "The border is coming up, then Reims, and after that, Paris. We'll make it." "Thank you," the ghost whispered. "She is waiting. She is still waiting for me. For 30 years now, every single day, in that same square near the station." Marta hit her face on Dennis's chest again. All the passengers understood. The ordinary scheduled minibus had become a temporary bridge between the world of the living and the world of those who had passed. The fog around the vehicle began to thin out quickly as the first morning sunbeams pierced the darkness, and large blue signs in French appeared on the road. France. They had made it and arrived. Exactly at 6 o'clock in the morning, the white minibus smoothly entered the deserted outskirts of morning Paris. Andrei stopped the vehicle in a parking lot near the Gare de l'Est, the final destination of their route. "Well, that's it. We've arrived," the driver said tiredly and turned off the engine. The passengers began to slowly step out onto the street in absolute silence. This night had forever bound them with one common secret, which they would most likely never tell anyone in their ordinary lives. Because who would believe such a thing? Andrei was the last to get out of the vehicle. He slowly walked to the rear doors of the minibus and opened them to check the cabin. The back row of seats was completely empty. There was no strange man, no shirt, not even that old work jacket. But on the gray rubber mat lay something else, a small, completely fresh white rose. From it, a damp trail ran across the floor, as if someone had wept long and bitterly right onto that spot, and next to the flower lay the same military dog tag. But now it was absolutely clean. All the old rust and dirt had vanished without a trace, as if completely washed away by time or human tears. Andrei carefully picked up the clean dog tag, hid it deep in his pocket, and quietly closed the heavy doors of the vehicle. The driver raised his head and looked at the clear morning Parisian sky. Somewhere out there, among the millions of residents of this vast city, an old gray-haired woman, perhaps at this very minute, felt a strange peace in her soul for the first time in 30 years. Because the one she had waited for so long and faithfully since the distant 90s had finally arrived. His long journey of 30 years was successfully completed. The next time you are traveling in a night inner-city bus, just look back at the back rows of seats. Perhaps that strange, silent passenger in the deep hood, sitting in the very corner, is not just sleeping. Perhaps he is just trying to finish his last, most important journey in life. Take care of yourselves on the road, and never turn down those who desperately ask you to drive them home, even if their name is not on your lists.